Good morning everybody. Yesterday I made a video for you guys. I did this bracelet, so that's what you're going to be making. That's what's in the tutorial. Let's move the needles. That's the dog barking already. He just loves to bark as soon as I make a video or do something. Lick, drink, scratch, stick his nose under the camera. This time he's barking, sorry about that. But yeah, I tell you through the video everything you need. So you're going to need 3 colours of seed bead, size 11/0, a nice long needle in a size 10. I've used some beeswax because I've used this upholstery thread, which is nice and thin. Yeah, 3 colours of seed bead, just a couple of grams of each, not really very much. Your flat nose pliers for, you know, squeezing the end of your thread so that you can thread your needle, your scissors, and I think that's it. Oh yes, you're going to need some glue. Doesn't matter what type of glue, as long as it's, you know, nice clear glue and a fast drying and good strong adhesive. And that's about it. If you're going to use a leather end instead of this end, you can just use a piece of leather for your end with a thread. I'll show you how to do that. Or you can use these slide clasps, and I've used a lobster claw. And you'll need some jump rings. I've used the split rings because several times I've made things for people and they've said the beadwork has stayed intact and been perfect, but those jump rings have come open and come off. So now I use the split rings because I find them stronger, especially for something like a bracelet where you know you've got that pressure. I mean, the beadwork is so strong, that's not going to break. But if you've got a weak jump ring here and it gets pulled, they tend to come open. So I use the split rings. They're a bit fiddly, but they do a good job. So that's everything I think you need. So we're going to make this beautiful bracelet today, from beginning to end, the whole thing, full tutorial. So stick around and I will teach you how to do this. And of course you will need your loom, whichever type of loom, it doesn't matter. Mine's just a cheap loom. I think it only cost me £10 off Amazon. It's not the greatest, but it does the job. So yeah, a loom, and get your stuff together and let's get started. Good morning everybody. I'm going to make a loom bracelet today. I'm only going to use 3 colours. You can do this with Delica or with ordinary 11/0 seed beads. This one's going to be with 11/0s, and I might make the same bracelet in Delica just to show you the difference between how they turn out, because they turn out quite different. If I was using a larger bead, I might use this silk thread, but when you're using tiny beads like 11/0s or Delicas, it seems to very slightly show between your beads. So you've got a slight little line of the thread that really slightly shows, which I don't like. So when I'm using the smaller beads, I prefer a smaller thread. So I'm going to use this, which is, I think it's called Ceylon or Eslon, and it's is a sewing thread, but it's more for things like upholstery. So I'm going to go ahead and thread my bead loom. Yours may well be different from mine, but any bead loom would do. You can even make your own. I've seen people make them from cardboard and all sorts of things. So I'm going to start off by tying my thread to one end of my loom. Now if your bracelet, for instance, like this one, I'm just going to do a small one to start with, 9 beads wide. So if you've got 9 beads, you want 10 weft threads. The threads that go down along here will be your weft threads, and the threads that you go this way with and thread your beads on with is your weave thread. So I'm now doing my weft thread. So you want one more row of thread to your amount of beads. So my width is going to be 9 beads wide, so I'm going to have 10 sorry, excuse me, 10 weft threads. So I'm going to start with 1, and then you've got to go exactly opposite. And if you know, if you're unsure, just count in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. See, I'm 1 off. So for your first one, it does pay to have a little county. So and then I'm gonna wind it around the end of here, the end of my course your loom might be designed differently. So you want to get these nice and tight, like so, and just keep going like that. So once you've got your first one in, it's kind of obvious where the following ones go. That first one I would recommend to count, because even if you've done it more than once, it's shocking how it really does look like it's in line and it's actually not. So I always count that first one just to be 100% sure, because you don't want to weave up all your weft threads and then find that you've done it wrong. So down like that, nice and tight. Done something wrong there. Yep, I've gone down the wrong one, have I? No, it's the right one. See, it looks wider there, doesn't it? But that's, I think, just the unevenness of my loom. This is going to be one of the smallest ones I've done, but otherwise videos take so long, and when you try and load videos that are hours long to the internet, to YouTube, it seems to take forever. Yeah, that one seems to be wider than the others. Maybe I should have done it on another spot. Never mind. They'll pull together anyway, it'll be fine. Because you have to kind of pull them in when you put your first row of beads on. That's why the first row is so hard to do. Next one, come on, catch. There we go. And in. So keep going like that until you've got your appropriate length amount of threads, and then, you know, at some point you can switch over to the other side and start weaving from that side. But on one with just 10 weft threads, I think I'll just stick to the one sort of bobbin on the end. And then once I've reached my 10, I'll come back to you. Okay, so I've slightly repositioned my threads because one of my little things is not sitting quite correct, so I re-threaded. So I've done my 10 threads, and then I've tied them off on the end here, like so. And then just for extra security, I'm going to just pop it through that one, wind it round, and then put it back through that one. Doesn't matter if it tangles a bit, because you're not going to be using that thread for anything else, just to make sure it stays in. And then I've got 3 colours of seed bead here. I've got a blue, a cream and a black, and I will just find my needle and then I'll tell you what needle you need. Sorry about that, I haven't prepared myself correctly. Okay, so I've got my needles. Let's have a look. Let's get my lid off. You want a super long... Oh, wait. Let's try it this way. I don't know what I'm doing wrong here. Yeah, that's it. Nice super long needle, like so. There's one stuck. I wonder why that's stuck. Maybe it's jabbed into the thing. And there you go. There's another one. Maybe there's just 2. Oh, that's weird how they're getting stuck, isn't it? Why are they stuck? It's bizarre. Right, well, oh, there we go. Oh, that's obviously the one I've used before. That's why it's stuck, it's a bit bent. Okay, let's try and... I'll sort that out in a minute anyway, off camera. So you want one of these, probably a size 10. You see the length of that needle. So you want an extra long, that might be 12. So maybe a size 10, I think that might be a size 10. As you can tell by the feel of this one, a size 10. And a long needle like that, so you can, because obviously you might have one, you might buy a pattern and decide to have 20 wefts, and then you've got to, it's got to reach all the way through. So a nice long, super long needle, you can get them on Amazon. And really you want one nice and straight that's not bent, because then your beads don't always stay where they should. So I'm going to try and pick, unfortunately that's the thickness I want, but it's not very straight, so I think I'm going to have to use a 12 maybe. Yeah, that's the 10, the black ones. Or maybe I could use the blue one. Anyway, I'll go and figure out which needle I'm going to use, and I'll be back in a moment and we'll get started. Yeah, and I've got to choose some thread. Sorry, I might use this same thread to use as my weave thread, or I could use fire line, £6 fire line maybe, anything like that. So I think I'm going to go ahead and use this one though. Okay, so I've got my beads ready. I'm not really sure how. Yeah, let's just do it this way. I'm going to have to do it that way, I think. Yeah, that should work. Right, so I'm going to take my thread. Let's zoom in. I've got my beads over here on my piece of bead mat here. Let's move that bit further in. So I've got my beads in 3 colours. Just zoom in a minute so you can see what I'm doing there. Right, so I'm going to take my thread, I'm going to attach it. Let me just start the other way around. Hang on a minute, sorry about that. Let's just turn it around that way. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so I'm going to take my thread and I'm just going to pop it through here first. There, now what I'm going to do is leave a long tail so I can weave this in afterwards. But for now, I'm just going to tie one small knot. It's a long enough tail to weave. Right, just a little knot like so. If you do want to keep it out of the way, you could maybe put it here out the way. Like so, just gently, because you don't want it to pull on anything either. There we go, like so. And then I'm going to take my first row of beads. So we're doing 9. So I'm going to take 9 of my first colour. 3. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I don't know what that was. Right, so I've got 9 beads. Let's come back in. We've got our 9 beads. What we want to do with those, try and keep your thread out. Well, I've got 1 wingspan. I mean, work with as much as you're comfortable, but for the purposes of video, I can't put too much thread on or it takes forever weaving in and out each time. So this is the really fiddly bit now, where you've got to get your beads in place for the first time, because once they're in, it's going to pinch up and everything's going to stay in place. So for the first row, this is going to be a little fiddly to get them all in the right place, like so, and then try and pinch them in place if you can so they don't move, and pull your needle through. Really, we're just pulling the thread underneath that weft, just holding everything in place. Whatever you do, don't tangle your thread. Almost. Right, so I'm going to pull through. Just going to pinch up like so. And what you're essentially doing, oopsie, got one done, is you're catching those beads between those weft threads, and then, gosh, what have I done? Hang on, I'll explain in a sec. I can't talk and focus. That's why it's so good for you, because it really does make you in the moment and focused beading. Right. Right, so essentially what you're doing is pulling that thread underneath, and then you're catching the beads up on top. So that's gone under, and now I'm going to go over and up through these beads, and as much as you can try and push in an upward direction and have good light so that you can see your needle. You see the needle shining through. Look, if you can't see your needle, it means you haven't gone over that weft thread. So you want the beads to pop up like so, and you want your thread to go over this weft. If it's dropping down underneath and the beads are too low, it's not going to catch. So essentially you're just catching those beads. Through like so. This is why I only used one wingspan, because the time it takes. Now see how that pinches everything into place? Do hold it carefully for this next row as well. Right, and again we're going to do 9. We're going to pick up 9 of our beads. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That one looks a funny shape from here. Might not be. 7, 8, 9. Occasionally you do get the odd shaped bead, even with Mayuki or one of the really good brands, Mayuki or Toho. Mine are all Mayuki, all the beads I use. Now let's place that second group. Have I done something? 1, 2, 3. No, that's correct. So pop them into place. It's still not going to be quite where it all should be, because it's not, not tight enough yet. The second row a little bit easier than the first row. Right, pop those into place like so. That's a zoomy zoom, and then pull your thread like so. And each time we're going to tighten that up a little bit, and then as we get further down they will just slot into place without having to fiddle around too much. So oops. Make sure you can see that needle through your beads, and just as much as you can, pop them up as you go through, and then try and, as you're pushing through, very slightly push upwards, an upwards trajectory, as opposed to just straight along. Try and slightly curve, push your needle up. This is how I end up with bent needles, so that you're definitely going over that weft thread, and none of those beads are dropping down underneath it. So you want those beads to pop up above your weft thread as you're pulling them through, and don't tangle your thread like I've just done. Right, it's just going to get this knot out, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've undone my knot, which I don't recommend making knots. Right, so that's your second row in. Right, then you want your third row. Another row of 9. And you'll see as we go how it starts to really, they just kind of pop into place quite effortlessly as you start to go along. See how they just pop in now. I'm going to hold it nice and tight. Make sure that the beads are up above the level of that weft thread, and they are all popping through. You get a nice little tight pull as you go. You can just push it down like that if it's not tight enough. So there, pop your beads up. Make sure you're going over them, make sure they're all popping up through like so. As you go through, zoom right in again. Don't know if you can see that. See that needle? If we can get any closer. No, we can't. That's as close as we can go. Can you see my needle? If you can't see the needle, you're going under your weft. So you really do, and like I'm slightly pointing upwards instead of flat. And like that as I'm going through my beads. You can see that silver of the needle going through. And then we're going to pull. I'll back off slightly because that's a bit intense. And try very hard not to knock my thread. So as we go through this, if I do every row with you, you know, exactly like this, piece by piece, it's going to take forever. So what I'm going to do is for each row, I'll row my beads up on my needle, show you what we're going to put on, and then add, and I'll be skipping, you know, skipping forward. So it'll be, instead of sitting counting out all my beads, they'll be on the needle. I'll show them to you and tell you which row. And I might not even show you the whole procedure weaving backwards and forwards, because I'll take it that you've got the hang of it by then, and we'll just so I can do a full tutorial with an actual bracelet instead of just showing you partial how to do it. So yeah, that's the first three. We'll do one more together, and yeah, then we'll start doing the jumping, but you'll be able to do it by then, trust me. One, so this time we're adding one black, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So I'll be showing you like that instead of counting out with you. And then I may just come back to you after having shown you once the row is on. I'll decide. I'm not really sure how I'm going to film it yet, because I don't know if I've done a whole tutorial on this before. So you really want to make sure they pop up. Look, that one's not here, not that one. On this row, there, make sure they're popping up. If you have to, give a little fiddle with your weft threads. Don't be afraid to push them about a little if you need to. But hopefully, if it's nice and tight, they should sit where they're meant to. Right, and pull. I find it very relaxing, very calm, peaceful pastime, very therapeutic. I really do enjoy it, yeah. So let's have a zoom. Again, slightly up at an angle, coming from underneath. To pop up through these, make sure they're all up above your weft thread. Make sure you can see that little glimmer of your silver of your needle. If you need to, just pop the edge one down. Sometimes the edge one pops up that thread, so make sure you've gone over and then just pull without making knots. Like so. And that is how we start our loom work, and I'll rack up my next row of beads and we'll start smashing it from here row by row without me sitting picking up the beads. So get ready and we will complete this bracelet together. One more quick side note before we carry on. If you are an experienced beader and you feel confident to do this, what you can do with that tail thread, instead of leaving it here, what you can do is, as you're beading your work, let's move my thread out the way, as you're beading your work, you can hold it in place here with your first weft thread, and when you go in and out, you can just incorporate that thread with your first weft thread, and it will eventually weave in down the side. It will weave in and then you sort of get to about here and cut it off. But because I'm doing this for, well, predominantly mostly, yeah, for beginners really, sort of step by step, I didn't want to do that in case it gets a bit confusing and complicated, especially starting the first few rows. So I'm going to weave this in afterwards at the end, and I'll show you how to do that. But if you feel confident, do go ahead and incorporate that tail thread in with the first weft thread, and you can weave it as you go, but that is a little bit more tricky, so we'll do that on the next one together. But for this bracelet, I'm just gonna weave it in at the end. So another little side note before we get cracking. Okay guys, I'll rack up my next row of beads and we will steam ahead. So next combination. And that's that row added. On your next row. There's always going to be 9 on your needle, so off we go. That's your next row. Yeah, tempting as it is to want to do one of these super duper amazing, super colourful ones, I think it's good to start with something simple, nothing too complex, because it's hard enough as it is. And don't be afraid to make sure you pop, your beads up. Make sure they come up above that line of your, do keep checking, and if they don't, just go through them with your needle, manipulate them, pop them up where you want them to be, make them sit in place, and then go back with your thread if if they weren't quite up. Just pop them around. Right, meet back on the next row. They should start popping on real easy now. Everything should just hold in place. And even when you pull your needle through, they should stay. They should just sit. It's all even now, look. See the pattern starting to come together. I do actually love these colours. I love this blue with the black and the cream. I think it looks really nice. Lovely colours. So yeah, it should be coming together nicely now. Just keep going like that. Row after row. Meet you back at the next row. And your next row. Hopefully this is clear each time you're seeing what we've added and what we need to add, and you can follow along. So let's keep going. Oops, sorry there, camera draw. And your next row. At some point I will have to add thread, so I'll show you how to do that, just in case you have to do the same, because I wouldn't recommend working with too much thread, especially if it's the first time that you're making one of these. So I will show you how to do that at some point. So just keep going, watch when you're here and there for the odd row. And like I say, if your beads are gone in, just pop them up like so, just because they do sometimes. They don't always sit exactly where you want them to, so don't be afraid to fiddle around, pop those beads up into place, just keep going like that, and I'll meet you back at the next row. You can see that pattern really starting to come together now, so just keep going. Make sure they pop. You'll hear a little sort of a pop when they pop up through your threads. And there's your next row, ready to go. At some point I will have to change threads, so when we get to that point I'll show you how to change threads, and of course I will show you how to finish it and all that sort of thing as well. We're going to do the whole complete bracelet, so you should hear a little pop as it pops up. Hear that little pop. And when you do, oh, tiny little pop, when you're pulling through, do keep in mind, there goes a lorry, give a little tug each time like that, because the last thing you want to see is loops here when you get to your finished piece. That's one thing I learned from teaching my grandsons. They didn't quite give it a little tug each time, so tug it at this end and then the same when you get back to the other end. Just making sure I can feel the top of all those beads as I run through with my needle, just scathing, and then when I go back through the other way, so a nice little tug, so that all these edges here are going to be nice and snug and tight. Okay. This is the beginning of our bird. You can start to see it come together now. And that just pops in. I think it's about to rain, which could be, that's your next row, disastrous, because I am in the caravan, which is a trailer for my American friends. My bead barn, bead shack, bead cabin, whatever you want to call it, is not finished. We've run out of insulation and wood. So it's going to be a bit of a delay. So at the moment I'm having to bead here in the trailer. Oops, I've dropped those now because my son and his partner and children have moved in with me, and I only have a 2-bedroomed house. So there is nowhere for my beading or my beads or anything. So yeah, we are in the middle of building the bead barn, the bead shack. Which is going to be my beading. It's where I bead and hang out and get some peace and quiet, and bead therapy, and also where I'm going to have my, you know, YouTube studio, my place to make my videos in peace. As you can hear out here in the trailer, there is traffic on the road, there is all kind of noise, and if it starts to rain, that is really going to heavily fall down on my roof and make a horrid sound. So bear with me, guys. We will be moved into the cabin as soon as we can get it finished. Maybe I'll do a little video and show you guys my cabin building, which is going to be the bead shack. Right, let me just select my next row of beads. And your next row. That bird wing is really starting to form now. And pop, did you hear that pop? And your next row. Pop that into place. At this point, as you'll have to do every now and then, I'm going to pinch these and just pull all my beads downwards, just to tighten everything up. That should tighten things up a little. And your next row. And we're almost halfway there. That's your next row. And the next set of beads. And just before we get to that next row, I'm gonna give things a little tighten, and your next row. Sorry if the traffic's getting a bit busy, guys, but the weather's not very nice out there. It's windy and I think it's going to rain. Next row there. So yeah, I'm afraid we have to put up with a bit of traffic noise. It's not very nice outside, and I can't really bead in the house with little toddlers around, and there's no space because it's a tiny house. We are now halfway through. So yeah, next row. and then give it a little tug and a tighten as you go. And your next row. And don't forget, you will always be totaling 9 beads per row. So it's really hard to get muddled up. That's why I picked a nice simple pattern. Otherwise, so many beads for me to pick up and filming, and yeah, thought we'd do one nice, quick, simple pattern. You can see it coming together now, very nice. And your next row. You can really see I'll just show you, it's all starting to come together now, look. Hopefully yours is coming along too. So, well done. If you've got this far, keep going. It's really not that hard. It's much easier than adding beads in peyote stitch or something like that. It's very quick. Beads up real quick. So yeah, next row. And we're over halfway there. And your next row. I think that road's starting to get really busy now. Sorry guys. But I can't only bead when there's no traffic. Otherwise I'll just be beading in the middle of the night. And that will be no good for me. So. And your next row. Yeah, even though I live in a nice little village, there's still a busy road, so at least there's no tractors today. Next row. Next row. Next row. And the next row. Next row. A couple more rows and we will have finished our bird, and then we'll be back on to, finishing the end. And I did forget to mention, you're going to need about 4 grams of the white or cream, whichever colour you use, and about 2 grams each of your other colours, so black and whichever other colour. So 2 grams, and 4 grams. That's not really very much beads at all. So, and there is your next row. And another bit of heavy traffic. So annoying. Can't wait to be up the garden away from the traffic in the cabin. Next row. Not too far to go now. And your next row. And your next row. We're almost there now. That's the end of the bird. Bird is done. So, and your next row. It's going to look like that. Okay, so we've not got too far to go now. I'll show you how far we are. There we go. Looking good, huh? Looks really nice. I love it. I love that little bird style. Right, my thread's getting a bit short now, so I'm going to change threads. And nice and easy. I can either leave this here and just simply weave it back in later on, or I can incorporate it in, like I was saying you could do at the beginning when I was mentioning about incorporating that in. So I think now you've done this much beading, maybe you'll be ready to join this in. So I'm going to incorporate this one in anyway, and the very first one I'm going to stitch it in at the end, so you'll get to see both techniques during this bracelet. Okay, so I'm going to add some thread. Is the next thing I'm going to do. So I'm just going to go ahead, thread my needle, and I'll be right back. And this is what your work looks like. Well done if you got this far. Not long now, we're nearly finished. So, and I'll show you how to finish your threads, yeah, how to add your clasps and all that sort of thing. Right, I'm just going to thread my needle. Be right back. I've gone ahead and threaded my needle, and I didn't mention earlier, but when I do use this type of thread, I like to wax it. So I just take it and run it through the wax like so. And after you've done that, just run your fingers down it so you've not got any excess wax that will tangle up in your needle, like so, the little bits, can you see them? So that pulls off your excess, and that will strengthen and waterproof your thread. You don't need to do that if you're using Fireline, but you will need your flat nose pliers to take the end of your thread and give it a squash it nice and flat, so like so, because round threads don't like to go through flat eyes, and these eyes on these needles are very tiny. So yeah, wax your thread if you need to. I use beeswax, and then we'll add our thread. Okay, so we're just going to do exactly the same as when we started. So I'm going to take that and tie it in a small knot, like so. Now, I don't want to weave two ends, so maybe I could thread that one through and weave it on the other side. Now that might get too complicated, so we won't do that. We'll leave that for now, and I'll do that one on afterwards. So I'm going to leave that one down, the one I've just tied in, and this is the old thread here. So I'm going to add the old thread on with my end thread. I've put it actually through the same piece, look. So that looks like one thread, and that will weave that end in. So we'll get ready and pick up our next row. Just leave this one loose and we'll thread that in at the end. So I don't know if that was clear. So we've got the tail, the old tail from the one we've just taken off of our needle. Take it all the way up and pop it into that same space. You can always bring it back around if you want to keep it secure, and pop it down that next one just so it doesn't slip out. And leave the tail we've just added, where we've tied our knot, loose underneath your work, and we'll join that one in at the end. Okay, right, let's get our next set of beads. Okay, your next row. I'm going to stick with this row with you. So you've got your tail here and your other tail incorporated into that first row. So, oops, pop your beads under just as you normally would. Keep this tail out of the way, just as you would. Pull through. That's our new thread added. And what will happen as we weave up and down that other thread is just going to be woven into our work. And obviously once you get a bit more advanced and a bit more confident, you can weave all your ends in. We could have woven this one back to the other side and joined it in here, but I think we're going to get a bit complicated. So just pull it through. And then this next row, when you do the next row and go under, that's going to tighten, you see, and that's just going to join these two. And after you've done a few rows, you'll just be able to pull that out and cut it off, because it will be secured. So right, let's go and get the next row wrapped up for you. And your next row should look like this. And this will be your next row. I might have lost this bracelet already. My son just came in from work and he really likes it, so. And your very next row. And that is your next row. Not only is the traffic getting heavy, but it's also, the light is starting to fade. So we'll do as much as we can. I might have to finish it tomorrow. And your next row. And this is our next row. Not too much further to go now, guys. We're nearly there. And your very next row. We are so close now. And every now and then this will come loose, that little thread that we added. So just give it a little tug every now and then, just to tighten it up and keep it in place. And yeah, we are almost there. pop, and in it goes. And that's your next group of beads. And another row. We are getting so close now, guys. It really is not far to the end. Only a few more rows to go. And the sequence next. And another row. And your next row. Okay, next row, and we're almost finished. And your next row. Don't know why that looks like a little grub or something, some kind of maggot. Right, next row, yep. And your next 3 rows are all going to be in this colour. So do 3 rows of this colour. And I'll join you for the final row. So this is the 3rd row of the cream or white, whichever colour you are using. Pop those in. Tug. Back through the top. And voila, we have finished. Also, I did trim that spare thread we had here. I trimmed it off here, cut it off so it's now disappeared inside. So we've just got that one here to weave in. Right, that's it. Let's have a look at our work. There we go. So we've got this end to get rid of. I also went ahead and undid the little knot. So where I joined it with the knot, I just did a loose knot and I've undone it. So there'll be no bump at the edge here. Otherwise if you leave the knot in, you'd have like a little, you'll see the knot. So I've taken the knot out, and this little thread that we had joined all the way up, that we incorporated with our thread here, I cut it and I got to here. Well, it was about here actually off camera there. That's the little piece where I cut. So it's woven in all the way to here. So that's not going to come undone. So what we need to do next is we need to take it off the loom and finish off our work. So I'm going to show you how I do that. Let's just get rid of this needle and yeah, position my work, and I'll be right back. Okay, that's what your work should look like. And well done if you got this far. All we've got to do now is, yeah, get it off the loom, tie on our ends and put on our clasp. Okay, so I've gone ahead and threaded this tail here onto a regular size 10 beading needle, and all I'm going to do is go up, so turn it sideways, up the beads beside where it's coming out of. So we're coming out of this one, go back into that one. Let's get a grip on there, hang on, we're at a funny angle. I'm going to go up through those beads. And just give it a little weave in and out until you lose your tail thread in your work. Just like so. Do that, work it up and down a couple of times and then cut your thread. And I've cut my thread, I've got a tiny weeny bit there. I mean, it will eventually work its way in, or you could use your thread zapper, or you could just give it a little quick like that. Don't actually touch it, just right beside it, and it will just shrivel up back into, and you won't see it at all. Okay, now we're going to work on taking our work off the loom. So we've still got this end on. Actually, let's start with the other end, I think. Let's start with this end. And we're going to untie this. I'm going to take it off this piece here where I've tied it. I'm not going to bother trying to untie that tiny knot. Oh, the bobbin came out, never mind. start unwinding. This is our first one. So instead of taking the whole thing off, I'm going to work on the knots first, just so it doesn't all loosen up while I'm working. So I'm going to take this one, pop it under. Oops, and now look what I've done, so it's very fiddly. I think this is part of the reason people don't like the loom work, is the finishing off. But I don't mind it. Right, so tie a nice little knot there, nice and tight, like so. And then we're going to take the next thread, if we can get hold of it. It's a little bit fiddly, but once you start pulling your threads through, unwind that one. I really want this one out. Let's just take this. No, I don't want to take that off. Let's cut that one. That's the next one. I'm going to cut it. If you can't twist them, sometimes I can manage to get them all off. But just cut your next one. I've actually cut two there, but never mind. So then you're going to take your next one, pop it up through there, and do the same thing again. And then the next one, same again. Oops, didn't go through. Come on. Suppose you could leave a needle on and do this, but oops. And pull tight. So now you've got your little knots like so. So each time you're just taking the previous one and going through the next one. So those ones are tied, but we want another one. Let's cut that one. Right. And yeah, just keep going like this until you get to the end. Oops, oh, look, that one's come off as well. So we'll just tie these two together because we've got two off. So we can do it like that. If you've got two. There we go. Put these aside. And just keep going like that until you get to the end, and you should have a nice little row of knots like so. You can see my little knots. That ties it all off. So just keep going like that until you get to the end, and then we're going to turn around and do the same on the other end. And our last one, and obviously we've now come off the loom on one end, and this is the piece where you've got your extra thread that you may have weaved in. So you'll have two there. And if you have this one is actually not the one I've weaved in. This is the one that was at the very beginning that I first joined. So, and we don't need to take the knot out of that piece because I'm going to be covering that up with my clasp. So do your last knot and join in both threads on that one. It can be a little fiddly because they do just bounce around a little, like a little rope bridge. Right, there we go, and tie it nice and tight, and then maybe do a second knot in that piece just to be sure, because that is your edge. And you've got two threads going through there. So hard doing this sort of thing on camera, I swear. It goes really easy when I'm not doing it on camera. Good Lord, what have I done? final knot. There you go. So you've got all these little knots in your end now. Some of them are coming a little loose. Just tighten them all up, give them a little pull, tighten them, and then what we're going to do is stick a very tiny amount of glue to hold our knots. But yeah, tighten your knots up, and then we go to the other end. It's obviously already coming away from your loom, so I'm just going to take it, cut all my threads, or you can just pull out your stopper and take them out like so, depending on the type of loom you have. And then I'm going to do the same, tie knots all the way down this end. It's a little bit more fiddly because you're not attached to your loom, holding your work tight, but yeah, tighten up all your knots, and meet you back when you've got some knots done. You just continue here. Sometimes it helps to separate the threads like that with a needle if they're sort of getting tangled up, and I think it works better with two knots. One. What happens? Sometimes I'm on film. 2 knots, and then we take one of those and then separate your next thread, and same again, 2 knots. One. Oops, no. It's easy to get in a tangle here, so do be careful. Take your time, there's no rush. My tendency is when I get towards the end, I get all excited that I've almost finished and be like, yay. Start kind of going a bit fast, and then I tend to make mistakes. So take your time, no rush. And yeah, separate those threads out if you need to using a needle so that you know which two you're getting. Get the right ones. And just keep going, knotting until you get to the end, really. Yeah, I think 2 knots works best, otherwise it's a bit loose. So do go ahead and do 2 on each one, like that, and keep going until you get to the end. Okay, once you've gone ahead and tied your knots, you're going to take some glue. I've just taken a small piece of card. You can use a bottle top or a coffee pot lid, anything you can find really to put a little piece of glue on. I'm just using Yoo-hoo for this. Sometimes I use elephant glue, or is it elephant? No, gorilla glue. I'm thinking of the tape, elephant tape. I don't know why they use all these animals, elephant tape and gorilla glue. I'm just using this Yoo-hoo, which is kind of an all-purpose glue, but you can go ahead and use whatever you've got. It really doesn't matter. And then what I'm going to do is take my ends here. And the reason I'm using a piece of card is to lay it on. So you would need a piece of card anyway to lay your work on. And I'm not going to cut these tails until after it's been glued, because I don't want the risk of them coming out. So you want to pull your tails nice and flat like that. You could even put something on them to weight them down. I'm going to use my beeswax, like so. And then you can use, I don't know, a pin, a toothpick, something small like that. I've just got one of these. It's just a piece of wire that I've bent to make an eye pin, which I had ended up not using for another project. So now for the ends, you won't be doing this if you want to braid it. I'm not braiding, I'm using this. I'm going to use the slide bar to put on my ends. Makes it look a bit more finished and professional. So it really doesn't matter if these are a bit scruffy, because that's going to get covered up. So that's another good reason for using them, is that you can really secure your ends with glue and whatnot and knots, and it's not going to show. Whereas if you're now just going to braid this, which some people do, but I don't like that. I don't think it looks finished, and I don't think it lasts as long. But there's all sorts of clasps you could use. Also, you could do this with a piece of leather. So you'll cut a little piece of leather, and then you'll do the same technique here, but then you'll place your folded piece of leather over your... I'll show you in a minute anyway, hang on. Let's just get to this before the glue dries. So you're only just going to take tiny bits, and you're just going to go up against the edge of those beads and those threads, just a very tiny amount of glue, so that when we put our ends on, there's no chance of these threads coming undone inside. So I'm going to turn it over and do the same on the other side. I think mine's gone a bit goopy, it's getting a bit old, I need some new glue, but my other glue did the same thing, that's gone goopy and I've run out of that one, so this is quite a good quality glue, it's quite strong, it adheres quite well, so even though it's running out a bit. Yeah. So that, make sure you've got a nice layer of glue on there, and then leave that somewhere to dry. And then once that's dried, we're going to carefully cut these off. So go ahead and do that to both ends. I'm going to now do my other end. And yeah, I did 2 knots on all of them. Just, yeah, especially with this technique, it doesn't really matter if your knots are a bit scruffy, because they're all going to go up inside that bar and you're not going to see any of it. So go ahead and glue both sides, give them a little layer of glue, like so. And that will secure those knots up inside your work. And then leave it to dry and meet me back when you've done that. What I meant by the other technique is you can also take a small piece of leather, or fake leather. Now you'd cut it, I mean I'm just doing this rough, so you'd cut it to measure the end of your bracelet. I've done this technique myself and I've taught it to my grandsons. And then you'd take this piece of leather and you would pinch here and just take out a little nip of your leather there. That's going to be to put your thread through. So, and we'd turn it that way, and then we'd put a piece of thread, whichever you're going to use. Let's see, what would I use? Where's my basket? I'd use some of this cord. So say you were using, this is just a green colour, you'd be using a waxed cord or something of that nature, and you would put your cord through here and attach it down, and then you would glue that over your end. And once you've glued it over your end, you would then sew around the edges and then use this for your clasp. But I actually personally don't like that look, but you can, you know, that's one you can explore. Have a little practice with that. It's just basically cutting your piece of fabric, you know, making a hole for your thread, attaching it correctly at the right spot here over that layer of beads, or possibly over a couple of layers of beads. Like that usually works better. So I would have done, if I was using the leather, I'd have placed it here. And then yeah, once you've glued it all lightly, you will then stitch all the way around the edges, securing it, and you'd have your threads coming out here, and then you tie each end of your bracelet. But yeah, I'm giving it this end, which is, I think, looks a lot more finished, and you get the whole length of your bracelet there. So, and that's called a slide bar, and I'll show you how to do that once the glue's dried. So leave it all to dry, and meet me when you get back, when you've done that. I mean, meet you back here when you're done. So that's what it's going to look like on. That's going to be absolutely gorgeous. I love it. Very pretty. Nice. Right, let's let that glue dry. It's drying quite quickly because it's very tacky and quite old, that glue. There you go. And then we'll move on to the next stage. Mine are not actually quite dry, but for the sake of time, I'm gonna show you how I do it. So I'm just gonna, really you want some nice sharp scissors. My scissors are quite blunt. I need some new ones, and just cut off carefully without actually hitting the knots, like so. I'm gonna take your end piece, which is this. I've already attached one of my rings, or 2 of them, I like to use the split rings, but you can use ordinary jump rings and attach those to your slide bar. And then I'm going to open it up very slightly, and you're going to take your beads. Take this first bead, and you're going to pop that inside the slide bar, lining up. You're going to make sure you line up the bottom with that line. Can you see it? And then we're going to slide them in. So it's a little bit fiddly. Let me just make sure I'm on camera, in frame there. Wrong side. So get that end bead in. And once you've got one in, you're going to feed it through and just slide it along like so. Like so. There we go. And that's in. And if you really want to double secure, you can blob some glue inside of your slide bar before you close it, but I really don't think that's necessary. And to close it, you don't need any special tools. Just take your, I've got a hard wooden surface under here, so take the end here and push it down against your surface really hard, and it will close like so. And your work is now secure inside your bar. That one's not quite down, so I'm going to put it off the edge of the, hang on, there we go. It needs to go a little bit tighter. I'm just going to take my pliers and give it a squeeze. I'm going to take it to the edge of the table. Sorry, I've gone out of frame, but I think that the mat's stopping it. Yeah, put it on the edge of your table on a hard surface. My mat's too soft, and then just squish it in, and that will hold everything in place. And you can either add your jump rings before or after you do that stage. So do that, and then we're going to do exactly the same with the other end. We're going to cut these off and add the other bar. Once you've gone ahead and added the other bar, you want to add a jump ring or 2 jump rings and your clasp of choice. I've just used a lobster clasp. So let's have a look at that. And that is your finished bracelet. There we go. And just does up like so. Let's see if I can put it on. I'm not very good at doing these things up, so I'll go off camera and do it up and then come back and show you. I only managed to get that on. I've got arthritis in this hand, quite bad. So I don't know if you can see that, how it's all big there and it doesn't go flat. It's deformed my thumb quite a bit, so I really struggle with these clasps, but there you go. Doesn't that look lovely? So if you got to the end, well done. Yeah, you can experiment with different ends, but you can buy these from most bead supply stores, these sidebars. I just think it really finishes off the bracelet nicely, gives it a lovely professional sort of look. You know, I just don't like the ones where you have to tie them up again because of my hands. I find that difficult, and I don't think they last so long when you use just the string and braid it together. It might work better with the silk. If you're making them with silk, then you've got something thicker to work with to make your braid. But when you're working, you know, with sewing threads and beading threads, it doesn't work so well. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that's helpful. Have fun, stay creative, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.